I'm going to start this video in a weird direction. This is a quote from a creepypasta you've probably read and laughed at before. In case you have no idea what I'm talking about, creepypastas are spooky stories which are copy-pasted across the internet. Some of them are kinda dumb, and this one's no exception. It's about Pokemon. Guess what, guys? Ash Ketchum is in a coma, and everything in the TV show is a metaphor for his cognition. Pikachu represents Ash's humanity. Ash can't evolve Pikachu because that would mean challenging his concept of who he was. Charmander represents his sex drive. At first, it's a cute, easy thing to control, but eventually becomes a raging inferno of disobedience. When Ash trades Pokemon, it's an attempt to push his own problems away. However, he realizes this and usually trades back very quickly. I'm bringing this up because I think it's somewhat true even in the real show. Ash doesn't need to be in a coma for his Pokemon to represent aspects of his psyche. Even outside the realm of fiction, a real person probably chooses their clothes and their friends, and those choices reflect their psyches. Just like Charizard is Ash's latent homosexuality or whatever. In this reading, Professor Oak holding Ash's extra Pokemon represents Ash's subliminal mind, while the Pokemon Ash carries with him are his conscious thoughts. Decomposing a person's mind into distinct aspects isn't anything Pokemon invented. Sigmund Freud thought the mind had three parts, id, ego, and superego. The id, consists of unconscious instinctual desires.
Hey, you! Eat your mattress!
Yum!
The superego consists of internalized cultural norms.
Ed, what have I told you about the needless taxing of one's digestive system?
The ego sits between the two and balances the mind's desires with social boundaries.
Make him stop!
Take 5, mortal!
Gotcha, Baron Guy.
Freud even beat Pokemon to comparing these cognitive aspects to animals and their handlers. Freud says the id is like a horse, and the ego is its rider. The superego must be the rider's dad, or Misty, or something.
At least he's hanging in there.
Freud's student, Carl Jung, proposed a bunch of mental components called archetypes. Buddhists have compiled exhaustive lists of mental states. If we want to be reductionist, we could argue that each of our neurons is a mental component, which together produce the totality of our existence. In my last video, I argued that religions are extensions of us. If we're worried about the ocean, we can give those worries to the right god, and they'll handle the anxiety instead. I find it interesting, then, that plenty of religions feature animal deities. Egypt had a few cat gods and bird gods, and correspondingly, the Egyptian notion of the self had wings. American Indian folklore is littered with talking animals, some of whom are said to have been shaped like humans until proper humans entered the picture. Some people know their god is real because their god speaks to them in their minds. We also speak to ourselves in our minds, and that's how we know we exist. Once we accept that the line between self and God is fuzzy, we start to understand that all stories are manifestations of our cognition, whether writers intend it that way or not, even when those stories involve animals. When I was a young squidling, I entertained myself by picking up objects and making them have conversations. Hey there, Mr. Toothbrush, it's me, Mr. Floss. All those voices came from my mouth and my mind. I was Mr. Toothbrush and Mr. Floss. They existed only through my cognition, just like me, and just like Ash Ketchum. So let's talk about tulpas. The word tulpa originally comes from Tibetan Buddhism, where practitioners could create beings or objects through pure mental power. Today, the word tulpa is used by certain internet communities to mean sort of an imaginary friend. This imaginary friend is supposedly autonomous and sentient in its own right, separate from the so-called tulpamancer. It's easy to look down on people with imaginary friends, but once we realize that our mind has already generated an autonomous sentient being, called us, there's really no reason to suspect that one is the limit.
I'm sadness.
In fact, lots of functions of cognition could be called tulpas. When you buy a gift for a friend, you imagine how they'll react. That imagined reaction exists only in your mind, but you hope it's untainted by your own bias to more accurately predict your friend's reaction. Our skull keeps copies of our acquaintances as a matter of course, because we're social animals who benefit from an interior model of companions. But we're not restricted to simulating real people. We can imagine Mr. Toothbrush and Pokemon. In this light, tulpas aren't some weird fringe idea, tulpas are the basis of all ideas. Looking through some tulpa websites, a fair number of tulpamancers create tulpas with shapes like animals, often my-little-ponies. No matter which way we turn, from religion to folklore to weird internet stuff, animals sneak into our cognitive process. So let's talk about furries. Furries are fans of anthropomorphized animal characters, often, sexually. It's common practice for a furry to have a fursona, an animal character who represents them. A furry might dress as their fursona, or use a picture of it as their online avatar. A furry might even have many fursonas at once. Some furries say they want to be their fursonas, but they already are. They just haven't realized it yet. A fursona comes from a person's mind, the same mind that created the person to begin with. In that sense, fursonas are not only real, but indistinguishable from the person who conjured them. Just like the mind makes gods, or tulpas, or Pokemon, or Mr. Toothbrush, or the self, the mind makes fursonas, and secretly all those things are the same. If a furry really wants to be their fursona, they might look to tulpamancers for advice. Some tulpamancers claim to be able to switch with their tulpa, meaning that the person trades their sense of self to them. It seems strange to pass around an I like a video game controller, but linguistically we trade our I all the time. When someone's car hits our car, we don't say it like that. We say, "You hit me." We envelop the vehicle into our I, and we don't call it dissociation. It's so mundane that we rarely even consider it. So the next time you observe or imagine literally anything, remember, that thing is folded into you and becomes a component of you. Things are made real by their relation to us, whether those things are obviously fictional or supposedly existent in their own right. We carry the world with us even as it carries us. Or maybe I'm thinking about it too much? That's all I do here at Thinkster. My avatar is a squid, not just because I think squids are cool, but also because tentacles are easy to draw, and the mantle makes it look like I have a huge brain, like Jimmy Neutron or something. It's easy to see why religions, anime, and internet communities have long turned to animals for symbology. The lexicon of animal meanings is as ancient as animals themselves. If you were an animal, what would you be? And don't say human, that's cheating. See you next time!